And I'm at AR. So, hello everyone. Welcome back to the same library in which I'm always trapped. But today, with a new show. I figure it's time I finally started dressing for the summer since it's been hot all the time. And I mean, normally if it's hot, I just don't wear clothes because I'm around and I can get away with it. But, you know, sometimes it's nice to have something a bit loose and drapey, so here's my best attempt at an Hawaiian shirt. But yeah. Yeah, what are we doing today? What are we doing? So, first things first, running down the list. No new followers, can't thank them. No badges, can't be talking about them. First, that's right. Ooh, that's the wrong screen. Here we are. So first, why would it be first today? For which we are very appreciative. And I've got to congratulate you not only on getting first today, but also on finally hitting your second type of Roman numeral, which I've been treating as though it's a pretty significant event. I don't know why. It's not really significant to any of this. I haven't got like a plan for the board. There's definitely not deep law reasons why I'm adding your name to the chalkboard. No, certainly not. Yeah. There we are. Yeah, congratulations on your full first. It's pretty good. Pretty soon, all of the rest of you combined will be able to catch up with that there. Won't that be exciting? Yeah. So yeah, what are we doing? So, yeah, first things first. So that's done. There's no new books to show you. I haven't actually been out today getting books. I started the morning collecting more stuff to build shelves on the upper wall, but
the rat!
Abe, speak of the devil. Good to have you here. Yeah. So, yeah, I spent the morning gathering materials for building shelves, and I spent the afternoon in sort of a personal project. Hey, Abe, good to have you. It occurred to me that there's all sorts of golems and stuff wandering around the library. And some of them's like the broken, dangerous ones that are beasts, and some of them is like just old ones. And it occurred to me that it'd be nice to have a golem, because I could kind of ride around in it, right? And then I'd have like a big physical body that I could use to do stuff, like move shelves and like build things. Now I don't know how to build a golem, and Lamp continues to refuse to teach me magic, but he also admits that it would be useful for me to have one. So if I can get him to tell me how to build one without teaching me how to build it, and then get all the materials together and figure that out, maybe one day I'll build a golem. I don't know how long that would take, if it's even possible. But yeah, that's a fun idea. But anyway, what are we about today? What are we about? That's right, so, yeah, as you can tell in the title, I've decided that today we're going to go back and pick up with the Book of Lord Shang. Because I'm not giving up on it, even though I don't agree with it, and it did slightly drive me mad last time we read it. But you know, if you fall off the horse, you just got to get back on it. And if that horse drives you mad, well, that's probably just the cost of doing business. So, I'm going to get back on that. But as always, Lamp insists that we farm clips. And he's very angry at me, because neither of the poems I did yesterday, which were supposed to be for farming clips, fit inside of a clip. So I am in trouble. So today, we've got a collection of poems that are, I think, relevant to the situation. I went and found some classical Chinese poetry today. Since, you know, we're doing Chinese philosophy, it seemed fitting. And we're going to do a few of them, and some aim is certainly short enough that they should fit inside clips, so hopefully Lamp will stop being mad at me, and then maybe help me build a golem. But yeah, I'm not going to set up the candle for this one, I think, just because I think the candle should be safe for special occasions, and this is becoming a regular thing. But I will take a moment to shift the microphone in the proper place, so just give me a sec. There we are. That sound alright? I hope so. Now we got a few poems, probably more than we'll be able to have time for, so I'll do them until the time sort of runs out. These are all quite classical Chinese poetry. And the first that we have is Thoughts in the Silent Night by Li Bai. Moonlight reflects off the front of my bed. Could it actually be the frost on the ground? I look up to view the bright moon, and look down to reminisce about my hometown. Then another by Li Bai, Farewell to a Friend. Green hills skirt the northern border, white waters gird the eastern town. Here we part with each other, and you set out like a lonesome wisp of grass, floating across the miles, farther and farther away. You've longed to travel like roaming clouds, but our friendship, unwilling to wane as the sun is to set, let it be here to stay. As we wave each other goodbye, our horses neigh, as if for us they sigh. The next is by Wang Wei and is called Farewell. Dismounted, we drank to bid you farewell. I asked my friend, where are you heading? You said, oh, nothing is working my way, so be back to the crags of Nanshan retiring. Go then, you'll ask the world no more, our days of endless white clouds unending. Next, we have by Li Yu, I climb the western tower in silence. Wordless, alone, to the west tower I climb the stair. The moon, like a curved sword, hangs there, held captive in the deep courtyard, and its lonesome phoenix tree is the cool, pure autumn breeze. Cut it, it doesn't sever, sort it as entangled as ever. It is a great sorrow to part, creating an entirely different feeling in my heart. Then to follow by Sushi, Song of River City. 10 years, dead and living dim and draw apart. I don't try to remember, but forgetting is hard. Lonely grave 1,000 miles off. Cold thoughts, where can I talk them out? Even if we met, you wouldn't know me. Dust on my face, hair like frost. In a dream last night, suddenly I was home, by the window of the little room. You were combing your hair and making up. You turned and looked, not speaking. Only lines of tears coursing down. Year after year will it break my heart? The moonlit grave, the stubby pines. One by an unknown poet next, simply titled God. I want to be your love forever and ever, without break or decay, when the hills are all flat, the rivers are all dry, when it thunders in winter, when it snows in summer, when heaven and earth mingle. Not till then will I part from you. And one last one, by Liu Yong, Butterflies in Love with Flowers. While I lean against the banister of a tall tower, the breeze gently blows. As I look into the distance, the end of spring arouses melancholy in my mind. Surrounded by dewy grass at sunset, I wonder who is able to understand my longing. I would rather drink to intoxication. One should sing when one has wine in hand, but drinking to escape offers no reprieve. I do not mind that my clothes are getting looser. My lover is worthy of desire. And that's the last of what we have today, or at least what we have time for. So, if you'll excuse me, I'll readjust the mic to our normal settings. And hopefully some of them is short enough for clips, so Lamp will get off my back. I hope you've enjoyed them. I'm never really sure if people enjoy the poetry. I'm never really sure of anything, really. You know? I mean, you talked to me at the start of these, so I know that you're there, at least in theory. And I presume you enjoy the books, because you come back from them. But the poetry, who can say? Is that just for Lamp? Is it for me? Theoretically, I could be crazy and you couldn't be here at all. I mean, Lamp does call you spirits of the earth. And who can say whether ghosts are real? It's all a bit above my head. But still, that's not the sort of philosophy we're here for tonight. So, much as I'm not looking forward to it, let's get back into it. The Book of Lord Shang. Now, the last time we read this, we got up to... It was only chapter 2, because it's broken into longer chapters, but it was part 6 we were up to, so we just finished up part 5. And the author had discussed how the benevolent Lord would rearrange the entirety of domain to eliminate love, brotherly feeling, and other generally understood virtues, as they were parasitic, all of it to maximise the control he had over the people to ensure the cultivation of barren lands. I'm remembering why I didn't like him. Still, you got to fully understand the text to be able to criticise it properly, and I don't like it enough that I want to criticise it properly, so we'll do that. Though first, a quick drink of water. Your elf. Now then, as always, if at any point during this reading you miss something, either because I've stumbled over it, hasn't been picked up by the marker for any number of technical issues, let me know and I'm happy to go back over it. If you have thoughts, comments and questions, I'm happy to hear them. If they're quick and brief to address, I'll probably address them at the time. If they require discussion, this book is, as I said, broken up into several small chapters and segments, so probably after every segment I'll stop and do a little bit of discussion. So if it's a long piece, I'll do it there. But do feel free to comment. I'm always happy to hear from people. Love to do a bit of discussion. Other than that though, I don't have much else to say. So without further ado, if you are sitting comfortably, I will begin. Six. The calculation of land. The disasters of the ruler of the world generally come from their not measuring their strength in the use of armies, and from their not measuring their territory and managing the grass fields and uncultivated lands. Therefore, sometimes the territory is narrow and the population numerous, so that the population exceeds the territory, or sometimes the territory is extensive, but the population is sparse, so that the territory exceeds the population. If the population exceeds the territory, then one should pay attention to opening up new land. If the territory exceeds the population, then one should set about calling in colonists. By opening up new land, one effect increase... There's a note here. There appears to be a gap in the text, which I'm listening to. This is not fragmentary. Opening new land, one effect increase. If the population exceeds the territory, then the achievement of the state will be few, and the military strength small. If the territory exceeds the population, then the resources of mountain and moors will not be utilised. Now, to neglect natural resources and to pander to the people's dissipations is to fail in one's duty as a ruler. When high and low act thus, and in spite of a large population, the army will be weak, and in spite of a big territory, its strength will be small. In administering the state, therefore, and in disposing of its territory, the correct rule of the former king was to populate the mountain and the forest with a tenth of the people, the marshes and moors with a tenth of the the valleys, dales and streams with a tenth, cities, towns and highways with 4/10. Then another author's note. The text seemed to be defective. In section 15, a parallel text runs: cities, towns and highways with 1/10, barren fields with 1/10, fertile fields with 4/10. There's some confusion. In administering of a state, therefore, and in dividing arable land, if a minimum of 500 mu is sufficient to support one soldier, it is not making proper use of the land. But if a territory of 100 square leagues supports 10,000 soldiers for war as a minimum, then it shows that the cultivated land is sufficient to nourish its population, that cities, towns and highways are sufficient to accommodate their inhabitants, and that mountains and forests, marshes and moors, valleys and dales are sufficient to provide profit, and that marshes and moors, docks and embankments are sufficient for grazing. Therefore, when the army marches out again, they march out and grain is given them, there is still a surplus of riches. When the army is resting and the people at work, the cattle are always sufficient. This is said to be the rule for making use of the land and for supporting soldiers. But nowadays, although the rulers of the world have territory of several thousand square leagues, the produce is not sufficient to support the soldiers and to fill the granaries, and the army is equal by the neighbours. I regret this state of affairs, therefore, on behalf of the ruler. Indeed, having a large territory and not cultivating it is like having no territory. Having a numerous population but not employing it is like having no population. Therefore, the statistical method of administering a country is to give attention to the cultivation of the grasslands. The way to employ the soldiers is to pay attention to making uniform rewards. If private gain has been debarred in outside occupations, then the people would be concerned with keeping to agriculture. If they keep to agriculture, they will be simple, and if they are simple, they fear the law. If private rewards are forbidden to those below, then the people would take the offence forcibly against the enemy, and by taking the offence against him, they conquer. How does one know that it will be thus? Well, the natural disposition of the people is that if they are simple, they will produce hard work and will exert their strength easily. If they are poor, they will develop common sense and give due consideration to what is profitable. If they exert their strength easily, they will think lightly of death and will enjoy employment in warfare. If they give due consideration to what is profitable, they will fear punishment and will easily suffer hardship. If they easily suffer hardship, then the capacity of the soul will be developed to the full. If they enjoy employment in warfare, military strength will be developed to the utmost. Now, if he who administers a country is able to develop the capacity of the soil to the full, and to cause the people to fight to the death, then fame and profit will jointly accrue. It is the nature of the people, when they are hungry, to strive for food; when they are tired, to strive for rest; when they suffer hardship, to seek enjoyment; when they are in a state of humiliation, to strive for honour. Such is the natural disposition of the people. If the people strive for gain, then they lose the rules of polite behaviour. If they strive for fame, they lose the eternal principles of human nature. How can we conclude that it is so? Well, take now robbers and thieves. They infringe on the interdicts of the prince, above and below. They fail in the polite behaviour of subject and son. Therefore, though their reputations are dishonoured and their persons endangered, yet because of the profit they do not desist. Above these are the scholar of the world. Their clothes do not warm their skins, their food does not fill their clothes do not warm their skins, their food does not fill their stomachs. They travail their thoughts, fatigue their 4 limbs, and suffer in their 5 internal organs, and yet they go on increasing their activity. This is not prompted by the eternal principles of human nature, but for the sake of fame. Therefore it is said, where fame and profit meet, that is the way the people will follow. If the ruler controls the handle of fame and profit, So as to be able to acquire success and fame, he is due the statistical method. A sage examines the weights in order to control the handle of the scales. He examines the statistical method in order to direct the people. Statistics is the true method of ministers and rulers, and the essential of a state. But never yet has it happened but that a state of 1,000 chariots that neglected statistics has come into a perilous position, and that ministers and rulers that neglected method have experienced disorder. Nowadays, the rulers of the world wish to open up their territories and govern the population without examining the statistics, and ministers desire to fulfill their tasks without establishing a method. Therefore, the country has a disobedient population, and the ruler refractory ministers. A sage, therefore, in organising a country, causes the people in home affairs to adhere to agriculture, and in foreign affairs to scheme for war. Now, agriculture makes the people suffer hardships, and war makes them run dangers, and the means whereby they can be led to encounter hardships and to perform actions that expose them to danger is calculation. For the people, when alive, scheme for profit, and when in danger of death, are anxious for fame. It is necessary to examine whence fame and profit spring. If this profit comes from the soil, then people will use their strength to the full. If fame results from war, then they will fight to the death. Now if, at home, the people are directed to use their strength to the full, then the fields will not lie fallow. And if abroad they are directed to fight to the death, then they conquer their enemies. If enemies are conquered, and at the same time fields do not lie fallow, and without moving, the result will be obtained of having both wealth and strength. But nowadays it is not this, not thus, sir. That which the rulers of the world are particularly concerned about is not all that of which the state stands in urgent need. In their persons they have the conduct of Yao and Shun, but in their results they do not even approximate those of Tang or Wu. The mistake lies with the handle which they hold. Let me be permitted to set forth their errors. In administering the country, they reject power and indulge in talking. By talking, their persons become cultured, but their success is small. So scholars, full of empty talk about the odes and the book of history, are held in esteem, so that people become restless and think lightly of their prince. Scholars who are out of office are held in esteem, so that people become estranged and criticise their superiors. Braves are held in esteem, so that the people become quarrelsome and think lightly of prohibitions. Artisans are used, so that people become volatile and easily move their place of abode. Merchants and retailers, though leisurely, yet make profit, so that people follow their example and discuss their superiors. Therefore, if these 5 kinds of people are used in the state, their fields will be fallow and the army will be weak. The capital of scholars who are full of empty words lies in their mouths. That of scholars who are out of office lies in their ideas. That of braves in their valour, that of artisans in their hands, and that of merchants and retailers in their bodies. Thus they can carry their personal capital round to any house on earth. If, for the people's capital, importance is attached to physical talent, and for their habit they are dependent on the outside world, then those who carry considerable capital will become temporary sojourners. This would have caused difficulties even to Yao and Shun, therefore Tang and Wu prohibited it, with the result that their success were established and their fame made. A sage cannot, with what the world thinks easy, overcome that which it thinks difficult. But he must, by means of what it thinks difficult, over that which it thinks easy. So, for example, if the people are stupid, and he can overcome them by means of knowledge, if the world is educated, he can overcome by means of force. When people are stupid, they think force easy, but cleverness difficult. If the world is clever, they think knowledge easy, but force difficult. So when Shen Nung taught ploughing and attained supreme sway, the leadership was by means of his knowledge. When Tang and Wu made themselves strong and attacked the feudal lords, subjugation was by means of force. Nowadays, the world is full of cleverness, and people are dissolute. And at this juncture, when the times of Tang and Wu are in are imitated. They practice the actions of Shang Yang, thus a country of 1,000 chariots, hereby falling into a state of disorder. There's an author's note after this. The text seems corrupt here. This is paying particular attention to the wrong things. It is people's nature, when measuring, to take the longest part, when weighing, they take the heaviest, when adjusting the scales to seek profit. If an intelligent prince watches these things diligently, order may be established in the country, and the capacities of the people may be utilised. If the state makes few demands from the people, then the people will make many evasions from those demands. Direct the people at home to adhere to a famine, and abroad to be concentrated in warfare. Therefore, a sage's way of administering a country is to prohibit much in order to limit the people's capacity, and rely on force in order to render trickeries powerless. These two methods being used in combination, people within the woods will be single-minded. Being single-minded, they will farm. Farming, they will be simple, and being simple, they will dwell quietly and dislike going out. Therefore, a sage's way of ordering a country is that the people's capital should be stored in the soil. The dangers should be run abroad by borrowing a temporary habitat. If their capital lies in the soil, they will be simple, and if, by borrowing a temporary habitat abroad, dangers will be run, they will be anxious. If at home the people are simple, abroad they are anxious. Then as a result, they will exert themselves in farming and be alert in warfare. If the people are zealous in farming, then their capital will be considerable. If they are alert in warfare, the neighbouring states will be in danger. If their capital is considerable, and they cannot carry it on their backs, go elsewhere. There's a note on the carry on their backs, like small merchants or peddlers, as an officer. On that, and go elsewhere. If the neighbouring states are in danger, they will not go where there is no capital, but to go to a place of danger and borrow an habitat outside. Even a madman does not do such a thing. Therefore, a sage, in ordering a country, looking at popular custom, fixes their laws with the result that there is order, and examining the state, gives his attention to what is fundamental. Author's note, i.e. agriculture, with the result that everything is fitting. When laws are fixed without looking at the customs of the time, without examining the fundamental things of the state, then the people will be in disorder, affairs will be troublesome, so the results will be few. This is what I call error. Now, the idea of punishments is to restrain depravity, and the idea of rewards is to support the interdicts. Shame and disgrace, labour and hardship are what the people dislike. Author's note, cf. section 5, where 4 kinds of hardship are mentioned. Fame and glory, ease and joy are what the people pay attention to. So, if the penalties of the country are such that they do not cause dislike, and the titles and emoluments are not worth attention, it is an omen of the ruin of the country. If culprits often escape through the meshes, inferior people will be depraved and dissolute, and will not think of the punishments as deterrents, unless they will be applied to the people in that haphazard manner. That being so, in the way of fame and glory, by means of gain not being one, then superior men will apply power to obtain a name, and inferior people will not avoid what is prohibited. Therefore, the punishments will be numerous. If the superior man, author's note here meaning the prince, does not step up his command clearly, minor penalties will be applied. If punishments are numerous and minor penalties applied, the country will have many criminals. Author's note, the text is not very clear, but the meaning seems to be that there should be a system in the punishment. Then the rich will not be able to keep their wealth, nor the poor to apply themselves to their occupations. The fields will lie fallow, and the state will be poor. If the fields lie fallow, the people will live by deceit. If the country is poor, the ruler will lack rewards. Therefore, when a sage administers a country, culprits have no government position, and felons do not hold office. If culprits was to hold rank, the superior man would resign from his position. If felons were to be clothed with brocades and fed with meat, then the inferior man would hope for such advantages. If superior men resign from their positions, one would be ashamed of merit. If inferior men hope for such advantages, one would boast of wickedness. So punishments and executions are the means whereby wickedness is stopped, and office and rank are the means whereby merit is encouraged. Nowadays, people spurn the ranks established by the state, and laugh at the punishments set up by them. This evil is caused by the law and method followed. Therefore, the superior man, in handling his authority, unifies the government in order to fix his methods. In establishing officers, he makes rank valuable to correspond with them. He makes his appointments, taking people's exertion into account, according to their merit, so that the balance between high and low is even. When this is the case, ministers will be able to exert their strength to the uttermost, and the ruler to exercise autocratic sway. That's the end of section 6. I'll have my quick swallow of water. And I will immediately, in entering into my commentary, point out that it still appears that Shang Yang's definition of a ruler who rules like a sage does end up with everyone either forced to do subsistence agriculture or invade neighbouring countries to make their living. Which, not ideal, certainly. I mean, there's a little more here to the argument, obviously the prosperity of the state and the things being well managed. And the distribution of populations is interesting, although again it is contradictory within the text itself. So it begs some questions. But yeah, again, overall it seems that his sole goal is keeping the people simple, controllable, which, is good if you're a ruler, but not so good if you're a people. Anyhow, there's not much else to say from this, so I'll press on. Part 7. Opening and debarring. During the time when heaven and earth was established, and the people were produced, people knew their mothers, but not their fathers. Their way was to love their relatives, and to be fond of what were their own. From loving their relatives come discrimination, and from fondness of what were their own, insecurity. As the people increased and were preoccupied with discrimination and insecurity, they fell into disorder. At that time, people were intent on excelling others, and subjected each other by means of force. The former led to quarrels, and the latter to disputes. If in disputes there were no justice, no one would be satisfied. Therefore men of talent established equity and justice, and instituted unselfishness, so that people began to talk of moral virtues. At that time, the idea of loving one's relative began to disappear, and that of honouring talent arose. Now virtuous men are concerned with love, and the way of talented men is to vie with one another. As people increased and were not restrained, and had for long been in the way of vying with one another, there were again disorder. Therefore a sage, who received the administration, made divisions of land and property, and men and women. Divisions having been established, it was necessary to have restraining measures, so he instituted interdicts. These being instituted, it was necessary to have those who could enforce them. Therefore he established officials. These having been established, it was necessary to have someone to unify them. So he set up a prince. Once a prince had been set up, the idea of honouring talent disappeared, and that of prize and honour arose. Thus, in the highest antiquity, people loved their relatives and were fond of what was their own. In middle antiquity, they honoured talent and taught a moral virtue, and in latter days they prized honour and respected office. Honouring talent means vying with one another with doctrines. Setting up a prince means relegating talented men to unemployment. Loving one's relatives means making selfishness one's guiding principle. But the idea of equity and justice is to prevent selfishness from holding the field. But these three methods did not aim at antagonistic purposes. The guiding principles of the people are base, and they are not consistent in what they value. As the conditions in the world change, different principles are practiced. Therefore, it is said that there is a fixed standard in king's principles. Indeed, a king's principles represent one viewpoint, and those of a minister another. The principle each follows are different, but are one in both, representing a fixed stance, or fixed standard. Therefore, it is said, when the people are stupid, by knowledge one may rise to supremacy, and the world is wise, by force one may rise to supremacy. This means that when the people are stupid, there is plenty of strong men, but not enough wise, and when the world is wise, there are plenty of clever men, but not enough strong. It is the nature of people, when they have no knowledge, to study, and when they have no strength, to submit. So when Shang Yang taught ploughing and attained supreme sway, the leadership was by means of his knowledge. When Tang and Wu made themselves strong and attacked the feudal lords, the subjugation was by means of their force. That is, in the case of uneducated people, when they possess no knowledge, they are anxious to learn. In the case of an educated society, not having force, it submits. Therefore, he wishes to obtain supreme sway by means of law, rejects punishment. And he who wishes to subjugate the feudal lords by means of force, relegates virtue to the background. A sage does not imitate antiquity, nor does he follow the present time. If he were to imitate antiquity, he would be beyond the timeline. If he follows the present time, he is obstructed by circumstance. The Chu dynasty did not imitate the Shang dynasty, nor did the Xia dynasty imitate the period of Yu. The three dynasties encountered different circumstances, but all three succeeded in attaining supremacy. So to rise to supremacy, there is a definite way, but to hold it there are different principles. For example, Wu was a rebel who seized the empire, and he prized obedience to the law. He disputed the empire, he exalted compliancy. By force he seized it, but by righteousness he held it. Nowadays, strong countries aim at annexation, while weak countries are concerned for defence by force, which means that compared with the early times, they are not equal to the times of Yu and Xia, and compared with latter times, they do not practice the principles of Tang and Wu. Because the principles of Tang and Wu are obstructed, for the countries of 10,000 chariots, there is not one that does not wage war, and of the countries of 1,000 chariots, there is not one that is not on the defence. Those principles of Tang and Wu have been obstructed for a long time, and none of the rulers of the world is able to develop them. Therefore, there is not a fourth added to the three dynasties, and unless there be an intelligent ruler, there is none who succeeds in being obeyed. Now, you want to develop the people by imitating the ancient rulers, but the people of old were simple, through honesty, while the people of today are clever through artificiality. Wherefore, if you wish to imitate the ancients, you will have orderly government by promoting virtue, and if you wish to imitate modern times, you will have laws by emphasizing punishments, and thus is commonly distrusted. What the world now calls righteousness, and the establishment of what people like and the abolishment of what they dislike, and what the world calls unrighteousness is the establishment of what people dislike and the abolishment of that in which they take delight. The names and practice of these two methods may be interchanged. It is necessary to examine this. If you establish what people delight in, then they will suffer from what they dislike. Thank you kindly, have I? I'll drink your health. Nostrovia. Yes. If you establish what people delight in, they will suffer from what they dislike. If you establish what the people dislike, they will be happy in what they enjoy. How do I know that this is so? Because if people are in sorrow, they think, and in thinking they invent various devices. Whereas if they enjoy themselves, they are dissolute, and dissoluteness breeds idleness. Therefore, if you govern by punishment, the people will fear. Being fearful, they will not commit villainies. There being no villainies, people will be happy in what they enjoy. If, however, you teach the people by righteousness, and they will be lax. And if they are lax, there will be disorder. If there is disorder, the people will suffer from what they dislike. What I call profit is the basis of righteousness, but what the world calls righteousness is the way to violence. Indeed, in making the people correct, one always attains what they like by means of what they dislike, and one brings about what they dislike by means of what they like. In an ordinary country, or in an orderly country, punishments are numerous and rewards rare. Therefore, in countries that attain supremacy, there is one reward to 9 punishments, and in dismembered countries, 9 rewards to every punishment. Now, in proportion to the gravity or otherwise of the offence, there are light and heavy punishments, and in proportion to the greatness of the virtue, there are large or small rewards. These two differences are constantly applied in the world. If the punishments are applied to accomplished crimes, then villainy will not be banished. If rewards are bestowed for virtuous actions that have been achieved by the people, then offences will not cease. Now, if punishments cannot banish villainy, nor rewards put an end to offence, there will doubtless be disorder. Therefore, in the case of one who attains supremacy, punishments are applied in the intent to sin, so the great depravity cannot be bred, and rewards are bestowed on the denouncement of villainy, so that minor sins do not escape unnoticed. If, in governing a people, conditions can be brought about wherein great depravity cannot be bred, and minor offences do not escape unnoticed, the state will be orderly, and being orderly it is certain to be strong. If one country alone applies this method, there will be order only within its own borders. If 2 countries apply this method, the armies will have some rest. If the whole world applies this method, the highest state of virtue will be re-established. This is my way of reverting the virtue by death penalties, and of making righteousness a corollary to violence. Of old, people lived densely together, and all dwelt in disorder, so they desired there should be rules. However, why the empire were glad to have a ruler was because he would create order. And having a ruler but no law, the evil is the same as if there were no rulers, and having laws that are not equal to the disorder is the same as if there were no laws. The empire does not feel tranquil without a prince, but it takes pleasure in being stronger than the law, and thus the whole world is perturbed. Indeed, there is no greater benefit for the people in the empire than order, and there is no finer order to be obtained than by establishing a prince. For establishing a prince, there is no more embracing methods than making law supreme. For making law supreme, there is no more urgent task than banishing villainy, and for banishing villainy, there is no deeper dasis than severe punishments. Therefore, those who attain supremacy restrict by rewards and encourage by punishments, seek offence and not virtue, and rely on punishment in order to abolish punishment. That's the end of section 7 and also of chapter 2. That is an interestingly wicked chapter. Let me have a swallow of water. Got to remember. That is a chapter that is interesting in a particular form of villainy, because what you'll note at the end there, when he speaks of providing rewards to those who despise villainy, is that the actual thing he is talking about and describing is rewarding people for dobbing in their neighbours for doing things that are worthy of punishment. Basically creating a self-reporting police state. Now generally I think of that as quite a modern form of evil, but here he proposes that the ideal society would not only punish people 9 times for every 1 time they reward someone, but those rewards would be given out to the people who would dobbing other people in to be punished. And again he reiterates the importance of keeping your people simple and under heel. And how, of course, by punishing them, you will, of course, leave them be happier than if you just let them be rewarded and be happy. Which seems a very self-serving narrative, especially given that it is all towards the increase in productivity of people. Have I mentioned how much I hate this book, and the author, Shang Yang? Because I really hate this book, and Shang Yang, the fellow who wrote it. It is the product of an evil mind. I'm honestly more surprised that it doesn't get talked about, because there's some books that are like, ancient wisdom that get talked about as being significant today, like The Art of War, which I've read, or the Book of Five Rings. Those are like talked about as, ooh, these are great for strategy and business, because they're sort of basic guides. Then The Art of War is kind of in the legalist framework. It's just more specialised. But this book here, this is absolutely the book that seems to be what modern corporations would want. Keep your workers under thumb, keep them simple, keep them miserable, keep them with the bare minimum. Perhaps it's a bit too on the nose. But yeah, hate this book, it's evil. Still, nothing to do but press on. Well, actually, there is one more thing I do want to point out. I was in the start of the chapter, or the start of the section, so I kind of forgot about it because it's got more evil. But in both this section and in the last one, Shang Yang opposes strength and intelligence, saying that if people are intelligent or clever, the way they dominate is by force, and if they're strong, the way they dominate is by intelligence. Which does imply a clear sort of delineation in his mind between the intelligent and the clever, the idea that a person cannot be both. Which is a very fascist way of thinking. Just something I wanted to know. I hate this man. I hate him so much. Glad he's dead. Right. Pressing on. Chapter 3. 8. The unification of words. When about to establish a state, it is necessary to examine standards and measures, to pay attention to law and order, be vigilant in government duties, and to consolidate occupation with what is primary, author's note, i.e. agriculture and war. When standards and measures are regulated in accordance with the times, the customs of the country may be changed, and the people will follow the standard regulations. If rules and laws are clear, the officials will commit no depravity. If the duties of the government are dealt with uniformly, the people will be available for use. If occupation with what is primary and consolidated, people will take pleasure in agriculture and will enjoy warfare. Now a sage, in establishing laws, alters the customs and causes the people to be engaged in agriculture night and day. It is necessary to understand this. Indeed, people abide by their avocation and obey the regulations even to death, and the honorific titles which the ruler has instituted, and the rewards and penalties which he has established are clear. And when, instead of employing sophists and intriguers, men are meritorious, the result will be that the people will take pleasure in farming and enjoy warfare, because they see the ruler honours the farmers and soldiers, looks down upon sophists and artisans, and despises itinerant scholars. Therefore, when the people concentrate on one occupation, their families will be rich, and their persons will be distinguished in the country. The ruler opens the way to public benefit, and bars the gate of private intrigue, so that the people's strength is developed to the utmost. If toil in one's own interest does not gain distinction in the state, nor is admittance to the prince obtained through the gate of private intrigue, then under these circumstances, meritorious ministers will be encouraged, and in consequence the orders of the ruler will be performed. Wastelands will be opened up, dissolute people will disappear, and villainies will not sprout. He who, in administering a country, is able to consolidate the people's strength and to make their occupation one, will be strong. He who is able to make the people attend to what is primary and to prevent what is secondary, author's note, i.e. trade, etc., is rich. A sage, in administrating a country, is able to consolidate its strength or reduce it. When standards and measures are clear, then the people's strength is consolidated. If it is consolidated but not developed, it cannot take effect. If it does not take effect, but there are no riches, it will give rise to disorder. Therefore, for one who administers country, The way to consolidate its strength is to make the country rich and its soldiers strong. The way to reduce the people's force is to attack the enemy and to encourage the people. If one only opens the way without barring the gate, the short will grow long. When it has grown and one does not attack, there will be villainy. If one debars without opening up, the people will be chaotic. If they are chaotic and one does not make use of them, their strength will become great. If their strength is great and one does not attack, there will be villainy and parasites. So, consolidating their strength is brought about by unifying their occupation. Reducing their fault is brought about by attacking the enemy. In administering a country, one should value the single-mindedness of the people. If they are single-minded, they are simple, and being simple, they farm. If they farm, they easily become diligent, and being diligent, they become rich. The rich should be despoiled of their riches by means of titles, so they do not become dissolute. Those who are dissolute should be divested of their dissoluteness by punishments, so they may concern themselves with agriculture. Therefore, if one is able only to consolidate force and not to use it, disorder ensues, and one is able only to reduce force but not to consolidate it will perish. So an intelligent ruler who knows how to combine these two principles will be strong, but of one who does not know how to combine these two will be dismembered. Indeed, if a people are not orderly, it is because their prince follows inferior ways. If the laws are not clear, it means that the prince causes disorder to grow. Therefore, an intelligent prince is one who does not follow an inferior way, nor cause disorder to grow. He establishes himself by maintaining his authority and creates order by giving laws, so that he gains possession of those who are treacherous towards their ruler. Thus, rule officials, respectively, rewards or penalties are fixed, so that employment will have a fixed standard. Under these circumstances, then, the country's regulations will be clear, and the people's force will be used to the utmost. Titles granted by the ruler will be honoured, and the something will be advanced. Author's note: the text here is correct. The rulers of the present day all desire to govern the people, but their way of helping them is disorderly. Not because they take pleasure in disorder, because they rest on antiquity, and do not watch for the needs of the times. That is, the ruler models himself on antiquity, and as a result is hampered by it. Subordinates follow the present and do not change with the times. When the changes in the customs of the world are not understood, and the conditions for governing the people are not examined, then the multiplication of rewards only leads to punishments, and the lightening of punishments only eliminates rewards. Author's note, i.e., that the more rewards are promised, the more the people will commit crimes, and the lighter the punishments are, the less people will strive for rewards. Indeed, the ruler institutes punishments, but the people do not obey. His rewards are exhausted, but crimes continue to increase, for the people in their relation to the ruler think first of punishment, and only afterwards of reward. The sage's way, therefore, of organising a country is not to imitate antiquity, nor to follow the present, but to govern in accordance with the needs of the times, and to make the laws which take into account customs. For laws which are established without examining people's conditions do not succeed, but a government which is enacted fittingly for the time does not offend. Therefore, the government of the sage king examined attentively the people's occupation, and concentrated their attention on unifying them and on nothing else. That's the end of section 8. And there's a few points to be made here, but there's one particular that sort of stands out to me. And it is... Sorry. I struggle with this text to a degree that's sort of alarming to me, and I sort of lose track of it as I go through. That's what it is. He did his dismission of artisans, which he did again in the previous chapter, but I didn't comment on because it was lost among other things. But his dismissal of artisans is really sort of is notable to me, because artisans is just craftspeople, right? It's anyone who makes something. And so, you know, you have this thing where, and he talks about rewards and all this, but, and again, I think it's sort of semi-nonsense, very of it, but without artisans to make tools, agriculture is borderline impossible, right? Like, you need shovels and hoes and rakes and all sorts of things to actually make things work. And especially because most of China's agriculture is in the form of rice, which is done in paddies, which again require quite a lot of earthwork. So without smiths, which is a particularly specialised form of lifelong sort of trade that an artisan would come into, you're really not likely to get a lot of agriculture done. This actually might be a product of the time. I'll say that though, because this text is 2,000 years old, which I think makes it older than ironwork. At least when ironwork were in common usage. This might still be a Bronze Age text, in which case metal might have been scarcer, and so metal tools might not have been as commonplace. And if that's the case, then maybe artisans were held in lower regard if wooden tools were the standard for farm work, or wooden and stone. Which I presume you wouldn't have. I guess maybe you'd have specialised stone artisans, but I doubt it. In that case, bronze workers might have been more creating high class and sort of ornamental objects, and then you could see more disdain coming for it. But yeah, in a more modern context, the idea of lacking artisans is crazy. Because an artisan is just anyone who makes some. And I mean, if you consider all the things you need just to sort of go throughout your day, you know, you can't make your own stuff reasonably. I mean, even if you lived a much simpler life, you know, do you know how to make shoes? How much time is it going to make you to make a pair of shoes? And I guess peasants maybe wouldn't expect to have shoes. God, I don't know really. I can't really picture the last star, so it makes some of these things maybe make more sense in context, but they do seem very grim and sort of absurd just on the face of them. Oh, but we're coming up on the ad break, so I won't start the next chapter immediately. Instead, while we're waiting, I will get a little into more into how I despise and think this man is evil, I guess. I'm really disappointed. I was expecting. I mentioned when I was reading the analects, I didn't expect to enjoy them too much, and then I really did. I was hoping when I come into this one, I'll feel much the same way. But I misunderstood what it was, and consequently I've just been miserable in reading it, because I think Shang Yang is a very evil man, and that his ideas, well, his are eerily prescient of the horrors of the future to come. Yeah. Anyhow, ads now. As is tradition, now the ads are started, I will take a swallow of water. But yeah, I think what gets me about this book really though is the degree to which it is so heavily autocratic. Like, I used the term fascistic earlier, which, I mean, obviously fascism wasn't a sort of prominent, or it wasn't a formally established ideology until the sort of early to mid 20th century, you know, Mussolini and fascismo and all that. So obviously the ideas aren't actually fascist in nature, and obviously fascism is pretty heavily concerned with nationalist identity and all that. So it doesn't have that, but it does have a heavy degree of state control and authoritarianism, which is what gets to me, right? What's odd about it though is it's also, for being all that, it's also like almost the opposite of conservative, right? Like, it isn't a conservative point of view in the sense that it holds with traditions and traditional things, because he talks a lot about reforming the law. If anything, it's I don't know, it's not liberal in that sense. It's not culturally liberal, because actually it's also it is culturally conservative. It wants people in this particular thing. And it's obviously it's very authoritarian in its thing, but it is, how would you say? I guess what you say is it's accelerationist, rather than liberal. It's not so much concerned with traditions as it is with conforming things to the maximum benefit of the current time. So it's I mean, if anything, it's culturally quite neutral. It doesn't really care about culture, which I guess is a sort of degree of conservatism. But yeah, it's accelerationist and authoritarian in its extremes, really. Which, you know, not ideal. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't really know what there is to this text other than being remarkably controlling, because it seems to be reiterating like mostly the same principle over. That's another thing I don't like about it. Is it's written in a very boring manner. It restates its points several times over, which, I mean, you know, like, I guess it's like the book, The Art of War, right? It's meant to get through to thick people, but when what it's telling you is oppress the people, keep them in abject poverty and you know, agrarian like serfdom, and any excess that is produced and put towards war, you know, repeating that over and over again just sort of grinds you down, makes you miserable. Because it's a very miserable sort of point of view. Anyhow, about 5 seconds left of the ad, so I'll have another swallow of water. And we're back. And I don't remember exactly how long the last Book of Lord Shang stream was, but I think by breaking an hour we might maybe have beaten that record. So we're fighting that old man. But goddamn, this old man got hands. So, let's get back into it, shall we? Before I decide not to, because I don't want to. Yeah. Right. None. Establishing laws. I've heard that when the intelligent princes of antiquity established laws, the people were not wicked. When they undertook an enterprise, the required ability were practiced spontaneously. When they distributed rewards, the army was strong. These three principles were the root of government. Indeed, while people were not wicked when laws were established, but because the laws were clear and people profited by them. While the required ability were practiced spontaneously when an enterprise were undertaken, but because merits were clearly defined. And because these were clearly defined, the people exerted their force, and this being so, the required ability was spontaneously practiced. Why the army was so strong when rewards were distributed refers to titles and emoluments. Titles and emoluments are the goal of a soldier's ambition. Therefore, the principle on which princes distributed titles and emoluments were clear. When this were clear, the country became daily stronger, but when it were obscure, the country became daily weaker. Therefore, the principle on which titles and emoluments are distributed is the key to the state's preservation or ruin. The reason why a country is weak, or a prince is ruined, is not that there are no titles or emoluments, but that the principles followed therein are wrong. The principle followed by the three kings and the 5 lords, protector, were no other than that of giving titles and emoluments, and the reason that people emulated each other in merit were because the principles which they followed were clear. Thus, the way in which intelligent princes utilised their ministers was that their employment were made dependent on the work which they had done, and rewards were bestowed on the merits which they had acquired. When the relation between merit and reward were clear, then the people emulated each other in merit. If an administering a state one succeeds in causing the people to exert their strength, so they emulate each other in merit, then the army will certainly be strong. To be of the same rank as others, yet to stand them in such relations as subject or concubine points to a poverty or wealth. To be of the same territory as others, and yet be annexed by them, points to strength or weakness. To have land, but the prince being in the one case strong and in the other weak, points to disorder or order. If there is a right method, even a territory of a square league is sufficient to give room for the body, and people may be attracted to colonise. And if it contains a marketplace, riches may become many. Whoever has land cannot be called poor, and whoever has people cannot be called weak. If land is made truly productive, one need not be anxious about not being wealthy. If the people are truly employed, one need not fear force or violence. If virtue be clear, and with the right teaching prevailing, one will succeed in utilising for oneself what the people have. Therefore, the intelligent kings utilised what were not their own, and employed those who were not their own subjects. The point at which intelligent kings attached importance was that a reward with titles only meant a real merit. If this condition were fulfilled, honour and outer marks of distinction were awarded them. If there were no honour connected with them, then people would not be anxious for noble rank. And if there were no outer marks of distinction, and people would not be concerned about titles. If titles are easily obtained, then people do not appreciate the highest titles, nor the various other titles. If emoluments and rewards are not obtained through a definite gateway, people will not strive to the death for rank. For a prince, there exists the fact that people have likes and dislikes. Therefore, for it to be possible to govern the people, it is necessary that the prince should examine these likes and dislikes. Likes and dislikes are the basis of reward and punishment. Now, the nature of man is to like titles and emoluments, and to dislike punishments and penalties. A prince institutes these two in order to guard men's wills, and he establishes what they desire. Now, if titles follow upon the people's esteem, exertion and strength, if rewards follow upon their acquisition and merit, and if a prince succeeds in making the people believe in this as firmly as they do in the shine of the sun and moon, then his army will have no equal. Among the princes and men, there are some who bestow titles, but whose army is weak. There are some who grant emoluments, but whose state is poor. There are some who have fixed laws, but who yet suffer disorder. These three things are calamities for a country. For if a ruler of men places the making of easy audiences before the acquiring of merit, then although he bestows titles, his army will be weak. If people, without risking their lives and danger, can obtain profit and emoluments, the grant of emoluments will only make the country poor. If the law has neither measures nor figures, then affairs will daily become more complicated. And although laws have been established, yet the results will be that the administration will be in disorder. Therefore, an intelligent prince, in directing his people, will so direct them that they will exert their strength to the utmost, in order to strive for a particular merit. And if, when they have acquired merit, riches and honour follow upon it, there will be no bravery in private causes. Therefore, if this teaching spreads and becomes successful, then when that is the case, ministers will be loyal, princes intelligent, order manifest, and the army strong. Therefore, in general, an intelligent prince in his administration relies on force, and not on virtue, and thus, without his being anxious or fatigued, merit will be established. When measures and figures have been instituted, law can be followed. Therefore, it is necessary that a ruler of men should pay attention to himself. Indeed, Li Chu saw an autumn's air at a distance of more than 100 paces. He could not transfer his sharp vision to others. Wu Hua were able to lift a weight of 1,000 chun, but could not transfer his great strength to others. And indeed, sages cannot transfer to others their personality and nature that is inherent in them. But that whereby success may be attained, that is the law. Now, in this single specific chapter, I do want to concede a single point, which I'll have my drink before I press on. I will concede a certain point in this chapter, and one that I think is the main theme of it, and which is, I must admit, a good principle that runs throughout this book. Namely that laws have to be simple and be understandable for them to be effective. Now, interspersed with all the rest of it, and sort of interlaced with the problematic ways in which the law is applied, or at least according to Shang Yang's personal philosophy, that doesn't really help us at all. Indeed, it's not great. But the idea that a system of laws has to be clear and to be apparent to the people to be functional is good advice. And it's advice that I think has sort of fallen on the wayside in the modern day, because obviously modern legal systems and codes are very, very complicated, being the realm of specialists and lawyers. I don't really know that you could have a simple set of laws in the modern day, really, but people need to understand the state of the law to be able to effectively function in society, and to be able to seek reward and merit where it is possible to obtain it is a good and clear point. And education on the subject is probably necessary. So yeah, that one point I will concede to Shang Yang. No others, still hate the man. Yeah, pressing on. 10. The method of warfare. Generally, in the method of warfare, the fundamental principle consists in making government measures supremely prevalent. If this is done, the people concerned will have no disputes, and having no disputes, they will have no thought of self-interest, will have the interest of the ruler in mind. Therefore, a real king, through his measure, will cause people to be fearful in fights between various cities, and brave in wars against external foes. If people have been trained to attack danger with energy, they will, as a result, think lightly of death. Should the enemy be routed as soon as the engagement has begun, and should he not stop in his route, abstain from further pursuit. Therefore does the art of war say, in a big battle and in the event of victory, pursue the fugitives not further than 10 li. In a small battle in the event of victory, pursue the fugitives not further than 5 li. Author's note 1. I do not find this in Sun Tzu's Art of War, but the meaning resembles his dictum, do not press a desperate foe to arm, in chapter 8. When hostilities begin, weigh the strength of the enemy. Again, an author's note. Sun Tzu, chapter 4. In respect to military method, we have 1 measurement, 2 estimation of quantity, 3 calculation, 4 balancing of chance, 5 victory. Weigh the strength of the enemy. If your organisation is not equal to his, do not engage him in battle. If your provisions are not equal to his, do not protract the war. If the enemy is numerically strong, do not invade his territory. Another author's note. Sun Tzu, chapter 9. The principles to be observed by an invading force and passing. If the enemy is in every way your inferior, attack him without hesitation. Therefore it is said, the great rule of an army is prudence. By estimating the strength of the enemy and by examining one's own host, the victory or defeat may be known beforehand. Another author's note. Sun Tzu, chapter 3. Hence the saying, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will run risks in every battle. The army of a real king does not boast of victory, nor does it harbour rancour for defeat. That it does not boast of victory is because it ascribes it to clever tactics, another author's note, and not to individual merit. That it does not harbour rancour for defeat is because it knows why it has failed. If the relative strength of the armies is well matched, the side that has clever leadership will win, and the side that has inferior leadership will lose. If the organisation has its origin in the calculations made in the temple, author's note, i.e. before the battle, Sun Tzu, chapter 1, indeed if a general, after having made his calculations in the temple before the battle, is victorious, is because a great many of his calculations have come true. There's a longer quote here, but most of it isn't really relevant. If the organisation has its origins in the calculation made in the temple, then he will win, whether the leadership is clever or inferior. He who holds victorious tactics will be so strong that he will attain supremacy. If the people are submissive and obey their ruler, then the country will become rich and the army victorious. And if this state of affairs is maintained for long, he will surely attain supremacy. But it is a mistake for an army to penetrate deeply into the enemy's country, in a difficult and unsurmountable terrain, and cut off in a cul-de-sac. The men will become exhausted, hungry and thirsty as well, and will, moreover, fall victim to disease. This is the way to defeat. Therefore, he who intends to direct the people, and he who mounts a good horse, cannot but be on his guard. Another author's note, the last part there, the text is corrected. That's the end of part 10. This part doesn't seem very... This is like just a potted version of the Art of War. It's not a very well translated potted version of it. We've read the Art of War before. It was the very first book I ever read. So if you're interested in that, you can go watch the VOD on my YouTube. Well, it's a bit rough because again it was the first one I ever did. I probably should do that one again at some point, really. But got lots to read, so at some point in the future we'll probably cover it. But yeah, not a lot else to say about that chapter. I'll have my drink of water because I should. Other than that, whoever translated this text was obviously familiar with the Art of War and felt that more precise quotations were necessary, which, if anything, sort of undermines again the quality of the writing here by Lord Shang, because He makes oblique references, assuming one has read the text. But you know, you should have read the text, but still. 11. The establishment of fundamentals. Generally, in the utilising of soldiers, there are 3 stages to victory. Prior to the outbreak of hostilities, laws should be fixed. Laws being fixed, they should become the custom. When they have become the custom, supplies should be provided. These 3 things should be done within the country before the soldiers can be sent abroad. For performing these 3 things, there are 2 conditions. The first is to support the law, so it can be applied. The second was obtain the right men and appointments, so that the law can be established. For reliance on masses, it is said to be the assembling of a mob. Reliance on outward appearances is said to be smartness. Reliance on fame and sight is said to be deceitfulness. If one relies on any one of these 3, one's soldiers may be captured. Therefore it is said, the strong are unbending, they fight for what they desire. By fighting, their strength develops to the full, and thus they are prepared. In this way, they have no rival in the 4 seas, and by order prevailing, products are accumulated. By the accumulation of products, it is possible for the rewards to be big. If rewards is uniform, rank will be honoured. If rank is honoured, rewards will bring profit. Therefore it is said, the army being based on a state of order, there is a marvellous result. Custom being based on law, 10,000 changes of circumstances are brought about. A condition of supremacy being based upon the mind, is outwardly manifested in a condition of preparedness. If these 3 points of view are all taken into consideration, the result will be that the strong may be firmly established. This orderly government is the necessary result of strength, and strength again of orderly government. Orderly government of riches, and riches again of orderly government. Riches of strength, and strength again of riches. Therefore it is said, the way to orderly government and strength is to discuss fundamentals. And that's the end of chapter 11. Or sorry, section 11. So, basically just do what Sun Tzu says in his chapter of the Art of War that talks about being prepared for war, and then talk in circles for about half of that. God, I hate Shang Yang. I want to break him with my hands. I want to break him with my tiny little rat hands. He deserves terrible biting. Oh Lord. Right, drink of water, nothing else to say. God, I hope the Mosey and the Tante Cheng aren't like this one. I was so hopeful when we read after we read the Analects. Right, pressing on. 12. Military defence. A state that has to fight on 4 fronts values defence. A state that rests against the sea values attack. 4. If a state that fights on 4 fronts is fond of raising soldiers, it will be in a dangerous position, as it has to resist 4 neighbours. As soon as a country with 4 neighbours begins hostilities, 4 countries mobilise armies. Therefore it is said that the country is in a dangerous position. If a state that has to fight on 4 fronts is unable to raise... Appreciate it, Wild. Is unable to raise, from a city of 10,000 houses, an army of more than 10,000 men, then the state will be in a dangerous position. Therefore it is said, a state that has to fight on 4 fronts should concern itself with defensive warfare. Do you like how I used 200 words to say the same thing that he said in the first 10? In defending walled cities, the best way is, with the strength of the worn-out man, to fight the fresh strength of the invaders. It is assaults upon walled cities that wear out the strength of men. So long as the walled cities have not all been razed, the invaders have no means of penetrating the country. This is meant by the saying, the strength of worn-out men should fight the fresh strength of the invading force. When the walled cities have all been razed, the foreign army thus finds the means of penetrating, and certainly it will be exhausted, and the people within the country will be rested. fighting with rested strength against those of exhausted strength, is said to be fighting with the strength of fresh men against the worn-out strength of the invading forces. All these are called the misfortunes attendant upon the besieging of walled cities. It is regarded as a misfortune that always, in capturing these cities, the strength of the army is worn out. And these three things misfortune is due, not to insufficient effort, but to mistaken generalship. The best way to hold a city is to have abundant strength. Therefore is it said, when the invading force musters its levies, mobilise as many as 3 armies, and divide them according to the number of the chariots of the invading force. Of these 3 armies, one should be formed of able-bodied men, one of able-bodied women, and one of the old and feeble men and women. These are called the 3 armies. Cause the army of able-bodied men, with abundant provisions and sharp weapons, to marshal themselves and await the enemy. Cause the able-bodied women, with abundant provisions and ramparts at their backs, to marshal themselves and await orders, so as to make at the approach of the invaders earthworks as an obstruction, and traps, chevaux de frise and pitfalls, to pull down the supporting beams and to tear down the houses, to transport what is transportable, and to burn what is untransportable, so that the invaders are not able to make use thereof in their attack. I don't know the meaning of the phrase chevaux de frise, but I think that's chevaux in the sense of horses, like horse traps maybe, I'm not sure. Cause the army of the old and feeble to guard the oxen, horses, sheep and swine, and to collect all that is consumable of plants and water to feed them therewith, so as to obtain food for the able-bodied men and women. See to it carefully that the 3 armies do not intermingle. If the able-bodied men mingle with the army of the able-bodied women, they will attach great value to the safety of the women, and wicked people will have opportunities for intrigue, with the result that the state will perish. Taking pleasure in the women's company, the men will be afraid of disturbing reports, and so not even the brave will fire. If the able-bodied men and women intermingle with the army of the old and feeble, the old will arouse the compassion of the able-bodied, and the feeble the pity of the strong. Compassion and pity in the arts cause brave people to be more anxious, and fearful people not to fight. Therefore it is said, see to it carefully that the 3 armies do not intermingle. This is the way to have abundant strength. That's the end of section 12. So I'm fairly certain that even by the standards of like the 2nd or 3rd century BC, this would have been considered pretty evil. In fact, it probably would have been considered more evil than it is nowadays. Like nowadays, the idea of women serving the army isn't a strange one. Like, you know, you have general equality. I'm sure people are still uncomfortable with it in certain circles, but you know. But back in the day, the idea of women as a fighting force was probably significantly more scandalous. And of course, you have the what's called burnt earth tactics, or scorched earth tactics, which are, you know, I mean, they're successful in warfare. Russia will attest to that in all cases, but they are very bad for the country itself. And you also have an army just specifically of old men and the disabled, which, I mean, from the sounds of it, the fact that you don't want them mingling so people don't feel bad for them means that they are going to be put at significant risk, which, you know, fucked up. Bad. I also don't understand why this 2nd army needs to be composed of women. Like for transport and sort of like, is this? I mean, maybe it's just an idea that like the roles women played at the time period, and they'd be better able to assess what could be taken away. But it's a very weird proposition that you just have. Like you have your normal army who does the fighting, and you got your army of women who do the scorched earth, and then you got your army of old men and cripples who sort of look after the animals and harvest all the food. I just don't understand. Like, it seems like a weird division as well as like us. Like, it seems sinister and evil in a lot of ways, but also just bizarre. I wonder if the translation here isn't super clear. Maybe there's meant to be some like metaphor here that I'm not getting, but this seems like, again, fucked up, but also just weird. I don't know. Right. Pressing on. "13. Making orders strict. If orders are made strict, orderly government is not delayed. And if laws is equitable, officers are not wicked. Once the law is fixed, one should not damage it with virtuous words. If men of merit are appointed to office, people will have little to say. If men of virtue are appointed to office, people will have much to say. The practice of good government begins with making judgments. When 5 hamlets are unfit for judgment, supremacy is attained. Where 5 hamlets are the unit for judgment, supremacy is attained. Where 10 hamlets are the unit for judgment, there is merely strength. He who procrastinates in creating order will be dismembered. Govern by punishment and wage war by rewards. Seek transgressors and do not seek the virtuous. Therefore, if the law is fixed and not altered, then our author's note, the text is corrupted. I'm just going to pause here to point out that by the text here explicitly, virtuous people are not people with merit, just by the definition here. If in the country there are no wicked people, there is no wicked trade in the capital. If affairs are many and secondary things are numerous, if agriculture is relaxed and criminals gain the upper hand, the country will certainly be dismembered. Because of course when agriculture is relaxed, everyone knows criminals become rampant. If people have a surplus of grain, cause them to obtain office and rank by means of their cereals. If through their own efforts they can count upon obtaining office and rank, farmers will not be lazy. If a tuber no more than 4 inches has no bottom, it can certainly not be filled. To confer office, to give rank, and to grant salaries without regard to merit is like having no bottom. If a state, when poor, applies itself to war, the position will originate on the enemy's side, and it will not have the 6 parasites. It will certainly be strong. If a state, when rich, does not apply itself to war, the poison is transferred into its own interior, and it will have the 6 kind of parasites and will certainly be weak. If the state confers office and gives rank according to merits, it may be said to be planning with complete wisdom and fighting with complete courage. Such a country will certainly have no equal. If a state confers office and gives rank according to merit, then government measures will be simple and words will be few. This may be said to be abolishing laws by means of the law, and abolishing words by means of words. But if a state confers office and gives rank according to the 6 parasites, then government measures will be complicated and words will arise. This may be said to be bringing about laws by means of the law, and causing volubility by means of words. Then the prince will devote himself to talking, officials will be distracted with ruling the wicked. Wicked officials will gain their own way, and those who have merit will daily retire more. This may be said to be failure. When one has to observe 10 rules, there is confusion. When one has only one to observe, there is order. When the law is fixed, and those who are fond of practicing the 6 parasites perish. If people occupy themselves entirely with agriculture, the state is rich. If the 6 parasites are not practiced, then soldiers and people will, without exception, vie with one another for encouragement, and will be glad to be employed by their ruler. The people within the borders will vie with one another to regard it as glorious, and none will regard it as disgraceful. Following upon this comes the condition where people will do it because they are encouraged by means of rewards, and restrained by means of punishment. But the worst case is when people hate it, are anxious about it, and are ashamed of it. Then they adorn their outer appearances and engage in talking. They are ashamed of taking the position and exalt in culture. In this way they shun agriculture and war, and outside interests being thus furnished, it will be a perilous position for the country. To have people dying of hunger and cold, and of unwillingness to fight for the sake of profit and emolument, are usual occurrences in a perishing state. The 6 parasites are rites and music, odes and history, moral culture and virtue, filial piety and brotherly love, sincerity and faith, chastity and integrity, benevolence and righteousness, criticism of the army, and being ashamed of fighting. If these are 12 things, the ruler is unable to If there are these 12 things, the ruler is unable to make people farm and farm. The state will be so poor that it will be dismembered. And author's note here. Section 3, Section 4, Section 5, Section 17. The numbers given are different in each case, but here there are really 16 things. So the number of these parasites continues to change, although all of them do continue to be obvious virtues. Rights, music, odes, history, moral, culture, and virtue. The state will be so poor that it will be dismembered. If these 12 things come together, then it may be said that the prince's administration is not stronger than his ministers. The administration of his officials is not stronger than his people. This is said to be a condition where the 6 parasites are stronger than the government. When these 12 gain an attachment, the dismemberment ensues. Therefore, to make a country prosperous, these 12 things should not be practiced. Then the state will have much strength, and no one in the empire will be able to invade it. Speaking of invaders. Therefore, to make the country prosperous, these 12 things should not be practiced. Then the state will have much strength, and no one in the empire will be able to invade it. When its soldiers march out, they will capture their objective, and having captured it, will be able to hold it. When it keeps its soldiers in reserve and does not attack, it will certainly become rich. The court officials do not reject any merits, however few they may be, nor do they detract from any merits, however many they may be. Office and rank are obtained according to the acquired merit, and even though there may be sophistical talk, it will be impossible thereby to obtain undue precedence. This is said to be governed by statistics. In attacking with force, 10 points are gained for every 1 point undertaken, but in attacking with words, 100 are lost for every 1 marched out. If a state loves force, it is said to attack with what is difficult. If a state loves words, it is said to attack with what is easy. If penalties are heavy and rewards few, then the ruler loves his people, and they will die for him. If rewards are heavy and penalties light, then the ruler does not love his people, and they will not die for him. If the profit disappears through one outlet only, the state will have no equal. If it disappears through 2 outlets, the state will have only half the profit, but if the profit disappears through 10 outlets, the state will not be preserved. If every penalties are clear, there will be great control. If they are not clear, there will be the 6 parasites. If the 6 kind of parasites come together, then the people are not fit for employment. Therefore, in a prosperous country, when punishments are applied, the people will be closely associated with the ruler. When rewards are applied, they will reap profit. Applying punishment, light offence should be punished heavily. If light offences do not appear, the heavy offence will not come. This is said to be abolishing penalties by means of penalties, and if penalties are abolished, affairs will succeed. If crimes are serious and penalties light, penalties will appear and troubles will arise. This is said to be bringing about penalties by means of penalties, and such a state will surely be dismembered. A sage prince understands what is essential in affairs, and therefore in his administration of the people, there is what is most essential. The fact that uniformity in the manipulating of rewards and punishments supports moral virtue is connected with human psychology. A sage prince, by his ruling of men, is certain to win their hearts. Consequently, he is able to use force. Force produces strength. Strength produces prestige. Prestige produces virtue. So virtue has its origin in force, which a sage prince alone produces, or possesses. Therefore, he is able to transmit benevolence and righteousness to the empire. That's the end of chapter 14. I swear to you, that was like almost direct word-for-word restatement of an earlier chapter. Everything that was said in that was said earlier. The creator of words by words, or the destruction of laws by words by words and laws by laws. The 6 parasites thing. The attacking with force, all of it just is a restatement of things that have already been said. All of them evil and wicked things that have been said as well. But still, what's the point of that? If you don't get your point across the first time, why just rewrite it again in exactly as confusing and pointless a manner? Waste of time, really. I don't understand. Have a drink. I begin to wonder at this book being considered a good book. I've refused a couple of books before because they're not good books. But I know that this one is considered foundational to one of the major philosophies about Chinese culture, and it is considered alongside the Analects as one of those texts which, you know, makes you think that it must have some sort of weight or merit culturally. But it's just so badly written and boring, and the advice it is full of is just so patently evil that it really makes you think. Like, I don't know. Bleh. But there. Ugh. I'm sort of torn because I don't want to keep reading it. But if I keep reading it, then there's less of it to read the next time I've got to read it. And in fact, if I really push, I might even finish it tonight. We've gotten through about half of what was left, so if I push to a little over 3 hours, we could get the whole thing done. But still. Bleh. Anyway, we'll push on a little further at least. So, 14. The cultivation of the right standard. Orderly government is brought about in a state by 3 things. The first is law, the second good faith, the third right standards. Law is exercised in common by the prince and his ministers. Good faith is established in common by the prince and his ministers. The right standard is fixed by the prince alone. If a ruler and men fails to observe it, there is a danger. If prince and minister neglect the law and act according to their own self-interest, disorder is the inevitable result. Therefore, if the law is established, rights and duties are made clear, and self-interest does not harm the law, and there is orderly government. If the fixing of the right standards decided by the prince alone, there is prestige. If the people have faith in his rewards, then their activities will achieve results, and if they have faith in his penalties, then wickedness will have no starting point. Only an intelligent ruler loves right standards and values good faith, and will not, for the sake of self-interest, harm the law. For if he speaks many liberal words, but cuts down his rewards, then his subjects will not be of service. And if he issues one severe order after another, but does not apply the penalties, people will despise the death penalty. In general, rewards are a civil measure, and penalties are military. Civil and military measures are the summary of the law. Therefore, an intelligent ruler places reliance on the law. An intelligent ruler, if things are not kept hidden from him, is called intelligent, and if he is not deceived, is called perspicacious. Therefore, his benefits, by giving liberal rewards and making penalties severe, he ensures that he is feared. He does not neglect those that are distant, nor does he run counter to those that are near. The ministers will not hide things from their ruler, nor will inferiors deceive their superiors. Those who are engaged in governing in the world chiefly dismiss the law and place reliance on private appraisal, and this is what brings disorder in a state. The early kings hung up scales with standard weights, and fixed the length of feet and inches, and in the present day these are followed as models because their divisions were clear. Now, dismissing standard scale, yet decided in weight, or abolishing feet and inches, yet forming an opinion about length, even an intelligent merchant would not apply this system, because it would lack definiteness. Now, if the back is turned on models and measure, and reliance is placed on private appraisal, all those cases there would be a lack of definiteness. Oh, the bot. Oh, don't worry about it, Abba. I got the alerts, no problem. In all those cases, there would be a lack of definiteness. Only a Yao will be able to judge knowledge and ability, worth or unworth, without a model. But the world does not consist exclusively of Yaos. Therefore, the ancient kings understood that no reliance should be placed on individual opinions or biased approval. So they set up models and made the distinctions clear. Those who fulfilled the standard were rewarded, and those who harmed the public interest were punished. The standard for rewards and punishments were not wrong in their appraisals, and therefore people did not dispute them. If the bestowal of office and the grant of rank are not carried out according to the labour born, then loyal ministers have no advancement. And if in awarding rewards and giving emoluments the respective merits are not weighed, then fighting soldiers will not enter his service. Generally, the principle on which ministers serve their prince are dependent, in most cases, on what the ruler likes. If the ruler likes law, then the ministers will make law their principle and serve it. If the prince likes words, then ministers will make words their principle and serve it. If the prince likes law, then upright scholars will come to the front. If you like words, then ministers full of praise for some and blame for others will be at his side. If public and private interests are clearly distinguished, then even small-minded men do not hate men of worth, nor do worthless men envy those of merit. When Yao and Shun established their rule over the empire, they did not keep the benefit of the empire for themselves, but for the sake of the empire they established their rule. In making the imperial succession dependent on worth and ability, they did not intend to alienate fathers and sons from one another and conciliate distant people. Authors note this is a reference to the fact that Yao and Shun did not give the empire to their sons. Yao and Shun are legendary sages and emperors. Conciliate distant people, but they did it because they had true insight into the ways of order and disorder. So too, the three kings conciliated people by righteousness, and the five lords protector rectified the feudal lords by law. That is, in all these cases, none took for himself the benefits of the empire. They ruled for the sake of the empire, and thus, when those who had positions had corresponding merit, the empire enjoyed their administration, and no one could harm them. But nowadays, princes and ministers of a disorderly world, each on a small scale, appropriates the profits of his own state, and each exercises the burdens of his own office for his private benefit. This is why the states are in a perilous position, for the relation between public and private interests is what determines existence or ruin. However, if models and measures are abolished and private appraisal is favoured, then bad ministers will let their standard be influenced by money in order to obtain emoluments, and officials of the various ranks will, in a stealthy and hidden manner, make extortions from the people. The saying runs, many woodworms and the wood snaps, a large fissure and the wall collapses. So if ministers of state vie with one another in selfishness and do not heed the people, then inferiors are estranged from superiors. When this happens, there is a fissure in the state. If the officials of the various ranks make extortions from the people stealthily, in a hidden manner, they are for the people like woodworms. Therefore it is exceptional in the world that when there are fissures and woodworms, ruin does not follow. That is why intelligent kings place reliance on the laws and remove self-interest, so the state should have no fissures and no woodworms. I'll have my swallow of water before I go to my points on this chapter. So again here, Shang Yang is talking about the importance of the code of laws. Well, I note that never does he mention how it is that one should write a code of laws that is capable of such upright honesty as being able to completely eliminate corruption amongst officials. But there is a point here that I want to point out, or a quote here that I want to point out that I think is significant. Is here it is. If the prince likes law, then upright scholars will come to the front. But if he likes words, then ministers full of praise for some and blame for others will be his side. Here Shang Yang suggests that by liking law, one will attract scholars of great merit who will help one design the law. But in previous chapters, Shang Yang has been very dismissive of the importance of scholars, and indeed has described them as being particularly wretched and vile creatures. Now there's not an overall point here I'm making, I just wanted to point out that he's a hypocrite, because I don't like him. But yeah, again, he places a lot of importance here on throughout the whole text really, on constructing a strongly worded code of laws that is simple enough for the people to understand, yet firm enough to eliminate the need for or desire for corruption and sort of quality in the ministerial people. And yeah, it's a very nice idea, but I don't think anyone ever in the history of the world has ever succeeded in it. So, you know, it is what it is. Anyway, That's the end of chapter 3. That would probably be a good stopping place if I wanted to stop. Or I could press on and try to finish tonight. Now the real question is, do I less want to keep reading this right now, or do I less want to have to come back to it in the future? There's 42 pages of it left, and we've done, between the two sessions, we've done just under 60 words, or 60 words, I think, so 60 pages. So. If I stop now, I think the next session will still have to be the longest one, so we'll press on a little longer. We'll press on, I'll say what we'll do, we'll press on the 2 hour mark, and then we'll stop round about there. That's the plan. I mean, we'll have one more session, but it won't be the longest one, so. I do want to take a moment here to thank anyone who has stuck with me through this, because much as I'm not enjoying this text, I can appreciate you sticking through me with it. Your support is greatly appreciated. Even more so than usual, I should say. Chapter 4. 15. The encouragement of immigration. In a territory of 100 square li, a tenth should be occupied by mountains and hills, a tenth by glades and morasses, a tenth by valleys, dales and running water, a tenth by cities, towns and highways, a tenth by barren fields, and 4/10 by fertile fields. Author's note, 1/10 is lacking. In this way, 50,000 workmen can be fed. Those mountains and hills, glades and morasses, valleys and dales are able to provide the required materials, and the cities, towns and highways are sufficient to accommodate the people concerned. This was the proportion according to which the early kings regulated the land and divided the people. Now, the territory of Qin comprises 5 times 1,000 square li, and so too, 1,000 li is the standard of a big country, as the authors know. But the soil fit for growing corn cannot occupy more than 2/5. The area of the fields does not come up to 1,000,000 mu. The produce and treasures of its glades and morasses, of its valleys and dales, and of its famous mountains, big rivers, are also incompletely utilised. This means the population is ill proportioned to the territory. The neighbours of Qin are the 3 Qin states. Authors know these 3 states, Han, Wei and Chao, in which the state of Qin had been divided in 376 BC. And of these, Han and Wei are found employing soldiers. Their territory is narrow, but their population is numerous. Their dwellings are built higgledy-piggledy, and they live close together. The game production is small, and merchants charge interest. The people on the one hand do not have their names registered, authors note, as in example for soldiering. On the other hand, have no fields or houses, so that for subsistence they will rely on evil occupations and pursuits of minor importance. Authors note, i.e. trade. With the result that those who are exempt from taxation, because they live in steep and inaccessible places, in morasses and by streams, are more than half of the population. Therefore it would appear that a condition where the territory is not sufficient to support its population is still worse than where, on the case of Qin, the population is insufficient to fill the territory. In reflecting upon the nature of the people, what they desire of fields and houses. Now, whereas it is probable that these are what Qin does not have, it is beyond doubt that Qin has them in surplus. What? Now, whereas it is probable that these are what Qin does not have, it is beyond doubt that Qin has them in surplus. Okay, so there's the only thing that I can use to make sense here is that in the first instance of Qin in that sentence, it is a single word CHIN, and in the second, it is CH''IN. So I guess I've got to assume that these are 2 separate states, both of them named Qin, but one of them is Qin and one of them is Qin. And they're just kind of confusing. Beyond doubt that Qin has them in surplus. If this being so, people nevertheless do not come west, it is because the soldiers of Qin are in sad plight, and the people suffer hardship. I venture to think the intelligence of Your Majesty's officials takes a mistaken view. Author's note on Your Majesty is a title which the rulers of Qin adopted in 325 BC, i.e. after the death of Shang Yang. After the death of Shang Yang. So this title was adopted after the death of the man who was supposed to have written this book. So was this once actually a good text, a really interesting, important, well-written text, and then because the people who would have the power to reproduce it were rulers with self-interest, did they keep adulterating it and changing it so that it became more self-serving until over time it became this morass of awfulness? Was it never a good text, or was it simply compiled later than is established and attributed to the significant figure so that it seemed important? Is there alcohol somewhere in this library so I can drink myself unconscious? These important questions will one day hopefully have answers. But not today, I suspect. Your Majesty's officials take a mistaken view, that is, the reason why we remain weak, and do not succeed in enticing the people of the free Qin states, is that we are aspiring in granting titles, and regard the exemption from taxes as a serious matter. They argue as follows. The free Qin states are weak because their people are concerned with pleasure, because exemptions and rank are treated lightly. Ch'in, on the other hand, is strong because its people are concerned with hard work. The exemption and the conferment of rank are treated seriously. Should we now confer many titles and grant exemptions from taxation for long periods, then we should be letting go of the principle by which Ch'in has become strong, and should be doing exactly that which has made the Qin states weak. This is the argument that causes Your Majesty's officials to regard the conferring of titles as a serious matter, and be sparing the granting of exemptions from taxation. I will venture, however, to think that this is wrong. The object in causing the people hardship and in strengthening the army to attack the enemy, and realise one desires. The Art of War says, author's note, this is section 10 from the quotations. The Art of War says, if the enemy is weak, the army is strong. This expression means that one does not fail in attack, but the enemy fails in defence. Now for 4 generations, the Qin states have gained no victory over Ch'in, since the time of King Shang Yang. Author's note, 334 to 319 BC, the same person reigned from 370 to 335 as Yu Qing. Again, the events mentioned occurred long after the death of Shang Yang, and the 4 generations which are mentioned enable us to date this paragraph as being approximately the middle of the 3rd century BC, time of King Xiang Wei. At times of the free Qin states have been defeated by Qin in small or big battles, in open battle or in storming defended cities, have been innumerable. The reason that in spite of this they do not submit to Qin is that Qin has been able to conquer their territory but unable to captivate their people. Now, if Your Majesty will issue a favourable proclamation to the effect that those soldiers of the various feudal lords who will come and submit will be granted exemption for 3 generations without hearing anything of military affairs, and those who live within the 4 boundaries of Qin, in the mountains and on the slopes, on hills and in marshes, will not be called upon for 10 years for military service, and if this is made clear in the law, it will be possible to create 1 million workers. I have said before, reflecting upon the nature of people, what they desire are fields and houses. Now, or is it as probable that Qin does not have these? It is certain. Is it probable that Qin does not have these? It is certain that Qin has these in surplus. If in spite of this the people do not migrate westward, it is because the soldiers of Qin are in sore plight and the people suffer hardship. And if they have benefit with land and houses, and the exemptions from taxes for 3 generations is granted them, that is, if a point is made of giving them what they desire, and not causing them to perform what they dislike, then all the people from east of the mountain will migrate westward. Moreover, to state the case frankly, if you do not act thus, you may fill the empty and wastelands and produce natural wealth, so that 1 million people are engaged in the fundamental occupation, or there's no i.e. agriculture, and the benefit will be manifold. How will you prevent the soldiers from failing in their attacks? Indeed, the trouble with Qin is that on the one hand, that if it raises soldiers and wages war, the country is poor, and on the other hand, if it remains quiet and farms, the enemy obtains respite. Your Majesty cannot combine success in these 2 fields. To So, although for 3 generations, author's note, above it refers to 4 generations. So, although for 3 generations it has waged successful wars, yet it is not subjected to the Empire. Now, if the old population of Chi'in are engaged in warfare, and if the newcomers are caused to occupy themselves with agriculture, and even though the army may stay 100 days outside the frontier, within the borders not a moment will be lost for agriculture. Thus you may be successful both in enriching and in becoming strong. When I speak of soldiers, I do not mean that all should be raised and mobilised to the last man, but according to the number of armies, soldiers, chariots and cavalry that can be furnished within the territory, cause the old population of Qin to serve as soldiers, and the new people to provide fodder and food. Should there be a state in the Empire that does not submit, then your Majesty should, herewith, in spring, prevent their farming, in summer live on their produce, in autumn lay hold of their harvest, and in winter pickle their vegetables, by the method of the great warfare, shape their fundamental means of existence, and those of the extensive culture pacify their descendants. If your Majesty follows this policy, then within 10 years, the various feudal lords will have no people from other countries. And wherefore then should your Majesty be sparing in the conferment of titles or regard exemptions from taxes as a serious matter. And the victories of the Chu and the Hua, battles in Qin extended its territory eastward by cutting off heads. And 2 authors note, in victories of the Chu, in 771 BC, when Duke Shang Yang of Qin assisted the Chu dynasty against the Zheng barbarians and escorted King Ping to his new capital in Lai, and as a reward he became an independent feudal lord, and so laid the foundation of Qin. And the Hua, in 697 BC, Duke Wu fought the Peng Xi tribe, who cut Yin off from the Chu, and made his way to the Hua Mountains. The mountain lies a little to the south of the sub-prefecture of Huayin, in the prefecture of Dangchu, in the present Shenxi. And I think I have to stop there because the ads are about to come on. Let's get to the end of the sentence. And the victories of the Chu and in the Hua battles, Qin extended its territory eastwards by cutting off heads. It is clear that there were no advantage in this eastward extension. The officials regard these events as great accomplishments, because losses were inflicted on the enemy. And now I'll pause, so it's at the end of the sentence and we're about to hit the ads. I'm a little sad to figure out that this text isn't actually entirely written by Shang Yang. It was nice to be angry at a single person, you know? It felt like there was a way to focus the sort of anger. But instead now you have this, I don't know, this sort of evidence that this text is sort of bastardized and fragmentary. And it sort of undermines the idea that this whole thing was the ill thought out idea of one man. Though weirdly, this section that is distinctly not from the original Shang Yang, I think is better. I mean, it's not super grand or anything, it's not as good as a lot of the Confucius stuff, but it does point out a very sound principle of government, and that's that encouraging immigration is almost universally a benefit to the government that encourages it. Population is power as well, and especially if you have underutilised lands, is it? And so, doing the things mentioned, granting exemptions from taxes, or exempting from military service people who would move to the land and provide for the economy, is only a benefit to the nation. Because if those people did not come, then there would be no military service or taxes taken from them anyway. And the excess that they do not give to taxation and military service will still enter the economy. And obviously there are exemptions to this, especially in more modern societies where you have more public services and infrastructure. Have people use roads and sort of draw on power grids and that sort of thing. Now obviously there's going to be a certain extent of public money spent towards them, but especially in ancient times, and especially for people living on the outskirts in like valleys and mountains, like I mentioned. In those cases, those people are nothing but a benefit, even if they draw no or provide no tax. And encouraging immigration is almost universally useful. much as the idea has become less popular in modern day. The people are a form of wealth for a state, and especially for a state with lands that are underutilised. So there's something to this, and especially in its sort of talk of the combination of of immigration with warfare, of recruiting immigrants from the enemy. It's very clever in that regard. I respect it a lot more at least than the rest of the text. I shouldn't say a lot because it is basically just basic sense, but compared to the rest of the book, high regard. Right, press it on them, so. Because loss was inflicted on the enemy. Now, if the people of the three Qin states are induced to immigrate by means of grassland and cottages, and if they are made to occupy themselves with primary things, then this way of inflicting damage on the enemy is just as real as a victory in war, and Qin will have the advantage of obtaining agricultural products. Conversely, by this plan, two birds will be hit with one stone. Further, in the victories in the Chu and Hua battles, or in that at Shang Yang, how many people did Qin lose, and how many soldiers, both of the people and the foreign inhabitants, were unable to occupy themselves with primary affairs? Author's note on the battle at Shang Yang. In 260 BC, Qin completely routed an army of Chao at Shang Yang. The reference to this battle here is of particular interest, as it shows this part of the text, at any rate, is about a century later than Shang Yang himself. The words here may be a later addition, as a few lines earlier only 2, and not 3, battles are mentioned. I venture to think that they were innumerable. Suppose among your Majesty's ministers there should be one able, within half of these losses, to weaken Qin and strengthen Xi'an, as much as by the victories in these 3 battles. Then would your Majesty, no doubt, grant him big rewards. Now, by the method which I propose, the people would not have a single day's scutage, S-C-U-T-H-E, don't know that word. Nor would the officials have the expense of great sums of money, while Qin would be weakened and Xi'an strengthened more than by 3 battles. If your Majesty still does not approve, then your servant is too stupid to understand it. Among the citizens of Ch'i was one Tung Ko Chang, who had very many desires and wished to have 10,000 pieces of gold. When his retainer begged for a monetary subsidy, in case he could obtain that money, he would not give it, saying, "I want to use it to obtain a farth." His retainer became angry and left him and went to Sung, saying, "This is being stingy about what he has not, therefore he is now in a worse position than when he had first had me with him." Now Qin, as the people, and Xi'an is sparing the granting of exemption from taxes. This is being stingy about what one has not, with the result that one loses what one might have. Is this not just like Deng Ko Chang, being stingy about what he did not have, and so losing his retainer? Moreover, in antiquity there were Yao and Shang, who in their lifetime were praised. In the Middle Ages there were Tang and Wu, during whose reign people submitted. There are 3, authors note there should be 4, there are 3 kings who are praised by 10,000 generations, and regarded as sage kings, yet methods cannot be applied in later times. Should you now make exemptions from taxations for 3 generations, you'll be able completely to subject the 3 Qin states. This is not, like the virtuous kings, merely established in the present times. Authors note there might be an omission in the text here, but affecting that latter generation shall be at the service of the king. Authors note the idea is that the king of antiquity only made the country strong during their own reigns, but by this suggested farsighted policy the result would chiefly appear later. This, however, does not mean that I do not welcome a sage. It is difficult to await a sage. That's the end of section 15. And that has been the 2-hour mark, so I feel that I should call it here, as I said I would. But we're less than 40 pages from the end, and there is something that I find, well, I'm a bit mixed on, because the next heading is 16, Compendium of Penalties, and then just the only entry in it is Lost in brackets. There are lost books here. Looking through what remains. Book 17, 18, 19. 19 is the chance to have to file. 20 remains. 21 remains. Oh no, sorry, 21 does not remain. 22 remains. 23 remains. 24 remains. 25 remains. 26 remains, and 26 is the last that remains, with 27, 28, and 29 being lost. So, in actuality, the last page is also just the listing of these last 3 books are lost. So, a page less than expected. How many pages are there actually? With that, there would only be 35 pages left, which is probably a little over an hour's reading. So I could push it tonight, but I think I would just be making myself miserable, and I'm at the point where I'm going to stop doing my best at this point on. So we'll save it for one more light night of reading, I think, and call that there. So rather than press on, we'll save that for another night. So let's do a little bit of final analysis, shall we, as to the nature of things. So, first things first. Ooh, let's see what screen am I doing? On the last chapter, as I mentioned, the idea of the policy of immigration is a pretty solid policy. And the idea of suggesting here immigration from the enemy by exempting them, gaining something that one would otherwise not have, is actually a pretty solid piece of wisdom. But compared to the rest of the text, this is a very logical and sensible piece of legal advice, or I guess policy advice, governance advice. It's smart, is what I mean, compared to the rest of the text. Which, I mean, also does agree with the idea that it's written by a different person, to several interjections of history, the events that happened after the death of Shang Yang. It's also written in a different form. It's an address to an emperor or superior, or I guess, or to a majesty, which separates itself from whereas the rest of the text was first a sort of discussion between 3 figures that is briefly entertained, and then a series of sort of, I don't even want to call them directives really, which repeat the same point over and over again. The style is different, the historical events are different, the advice is of a better quality and of a different tenor. And overall it is a much better, this one chapter is much better than the rest of the text, which I guess it's good to end on a high note. It does bring into question the sort of nature and solidity of this thing as a singular text. But yeah, that being said, I still haven't enjoyed most of this. Even that last part it's good advice, but it's not like a philosophical section of text. It is just actual political theory, policy theory, as opposed to the rest of it, which talks about the ideas of an ideal state in broad terms, which I think are very negative. You're very welcome, Abbe. Thank you for being here. I always appreciate you. Yeah. I'm still broadly dissatisfied with the Book of Lord Shang. The good points it has are very limited, whereas the bad points it have seem to be broad and sweeping. The majority of it has been negative, and it seems like the bit that is best of it is not even written by Shang Yang himself. Still, we've got about a third of it left to go through, so we'll see how it turns out. Maybe it can come good at the end, or maybe it won't. You don't have to like everything. I'm sure that I disagree with several of the points in this book. I do still, I don't know, it's not like Billy Balfour-Tubman or even Benito Serrano, where I disagree that it is a good book. I agree that it's, I don't know if I'd agree that it's good. It depends what you mean by good. I wouldn't say it's good morally, but I just don't know. Anyway, who can we read out? Strop's live and Varys is live. Strop has slightly more followers or slightly more viewers, but we've raided out the Varys more, so I am torn. What will I do? I will flip, I don't have a coin, but I'll flip this bookmark. And then this side up, do Varys, that's this one, do strop. Whoop. Strop it is. So we'll read out in the strop. Yeah. Thank you again to everyone who's been here for this whole time, I do appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed our session and that you get something out of it. And yeah, I very much appreciate you being there. Would do. Yourself as well, Abby, and to anyone else watching, I hope you take care of yourself as well. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Once again, up until the next of my streams, which will probably be tomorrow. I don't know if we'll try and finish this or just do something a bit more relaxing, but you know, keeping up with it. But yeah. Again, thank you all for being there. And as always, ta-ra.